So when my youngest daughter was, I don't know, 9 or so, she came to me and said, "Dad, I have a pun for you." I said, "Cool, what is it?" She goes, "It's a joke where you play with words, but that's not important right now." She totally did a Leslie Nielsen on me.
So good.
Hey, if you hear any weird stuff emanating from Dwayne's side of the stereo spectrum, it's because there's a thunderstorm going on in New Hampshire right now. Mm-hmm. And it's nice and beautiful and sunny in Connecticut. What can I say?
Yeah, they're not dropping the bombs on my house. It's actual thunder and lightning. So we're good.
Patrick is not here. He is, it's late at night in Germany where he is. And if you remember from last week's show, he did talk like this. And he's out at dinner anyway, so he couldn't make it.
Nice.
Also, before we get started, I just got word from Richard Campbell that we are going to actually attempt to do a live security this week at Dev Intersection.
Woohoo!
In Las Vegas, coming up here. What is it, the 11th or the 12th? Yeah. Something in there. Either the 10th or the 11th of September. And stay tuned for more of that. And also they're offering a buy one get one free ticket for Dev Intersection. I just heard about this.
Nice.
So if you want to take advantage of this, the initial registration will utilize a code GENAIBOGO, GENAIBOGO, buy one get one. And that's the discount code when you're registering for a full price registration at either nextgenaiconf.com/poundbang/register or devintersection.com/poundbang/register with the full price registration. And then you'll receive an email confirmation, which will include a unique discount code for a second registration to pass on to an additional attendee. All right. So it's all happening at Dev Intersection. We hope to see you there. Okay. Shall we get started? We have a lot of stuff here. Let's start with Cisco. Warning of critical remote code execution 0 days in end-of-life IP phones.
This is great.
For those who have end-of-life IP phones.
So it's
they
funny.
pass them out in nursing homes?
Right? Yeah, like
hospice.
Here you go.
It's your hospice phone,
Take
sir.
these old IP phones. Yeah, so it's weird. A lot of people in corporate networks, it's real easy to make a use case for upgrading hardware systems, right? Servers need more power, laptops. We need more power for different applications coming out, or maybe we're doing, leveraging AI and we want local AI chips and that sort of stuff. But there are two places we see devices fall behind, and there's no real good reason to upgrade them. One is printers, right? Because there's never oh my gosh, my printer doesn't have enough memory. I need to upgrade it to the newest and latest and greatest printer. You could have a printer sitting there for a decade and it's still functional.
Yeah.
The same thing as IP phones. So what's odd is we make fun of these are end of life, but they're probably actually in use more than any of the brand new phones.
Yeah,
honestly.
they're like office phones, right?
Right.
That work with a switched digital network. Yeah.
And it's funny, we in a recent pen test. So if you have these phones out there, you want to go, figure out how to mitigate. Well, first off, if you do have an IP phone on a network, nobody should be able to access it directly. It should be able to have access out to the internet if it needs it, or out to the, the IP server that's routing its voice traffic. But you shouldn't have users on the same network. That's number one. So even if it wasn't patchable, it doesn't matter. People shouldn't be on that network.
Well, do we say what ones they are? They're the Cisco Small Business SPA 300 and SPA 500 series iPhones that have this vulnerability.
Yeah, so chances are they're not going to release a patch. And normally I'd say go patch, but chances are there's no patch for these coming out because they are end of life.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So if you do have these, one way to mitigate it is to put these either on their own VLAN or on an isolated network that users don't have access to, so you're probably not going to have an issue there.
Or throw them in the recycle bin and get something real.
Or that, yeah. And whenever we're on a pen test, we actually always love seeing phones. I don't know why, but we try and exploit them, and sometimes we get in and sometimes we don't. On a recent pen test, we actually were just in the middle of last week. We got full administrative access to the phone. Could run anything. Huzzah, right? And then we're like, okay, now what? I'm like, yeah, we could put an implant on the phone that gives us access to the network always, I guess. But for the most part, you're not going to glean any usernames and passwords out of it. So it's just a fun thing to access, but yeah, still risky.
Right. Okay, number 2. This is from therecord.media. NHS software supplier Advanced faces £6 million fine over ransomware attack failings.
Oof.
What happened here?
Oof, that's brutal. So more often than not, we've started seeing supply chain attacks, right? Where hackers will attack a supplier of something to, a customer, whether that's, an HR software that multiple customers are using, or even if it's a managed service provider that has multiple customers, right? If you attack that route, you maybe compromise multiple people at the same time, which is fantastic if you're looking for the biggest bang for the buck in ransomware.
Right.
In this particular case, there's a software supplier that supplies Britain's National Health Service, NHS, and their software actually had so many serious failings in it that hackers were able to exploit the system and deploy Lockbit ransomware on those systems. So,
what's Lockbit ransomware? Just what it sounds like?
Yeah, it's just what it sounds like. Just a one of the forms of ransomware out there that's relatively popular. Well, what's interesting about this article is we're starting to see the article title, right? Faces Advanced, which is the name of the software, supplier Advanced, faces $6 million in fines. So not only did the customer get encrypted, but what we're finding is the software vendors who supply software to these organizations, if they're not doing code reviews, they're not doing proper pen tests, they're not, looking at security architecture, because frankly, why would they? It's not a feature. And if they sell the software to a customer and a customer gets compromised over that software, well, that sounds like the customer's problem, right? And I think we're starting to see a lot of legislation come back saying, no. If you write crappy, insecure code and you sell it, you're liable for the damages. So I think this is an awesome precedence, because I can't tell you how many times we break into an organization over a piece of software that's been purchased.
Right.
And then the software vendor may or may not create a patch. And then we continually find the same problem over and over and over again with different customers. Same software, just different customers. So yeah, absolutely. I think this is a move in the right direction to hold software companies and developers accountable for understanding the ramifications of the security of their software.
Yep. And as you and Patrick have said on numerous occasions, we're going to see more and more of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So better get your affairs in order here.
Well, and it's honestly, a lot of this stuff's not that hard to figure out. If you can get access to the software, right? You can't assume. I can't tell you how many pieces of software, Carl, I've seen where I'll pull it down and reverse engineer it, if you will. And there's straight up, encryption keys right in the software, or there's, secret passwords or secret connections, and you're like, or API keys, and you're like, what are you doing?
Hard coding it, yeah.
Yeah, you got to assume people are going to be able to see this stuff.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, especially if they're on GitHub, film at 11.
Well, there is that.
Okay, next story. Critical open SSH vulnerability in FreeBSD lets attackers gain root access remotely. I have this incredible sense of deja vu, wasn't there? Isn't this an old vulnerability? Yeah,
this sounds like the same type of thing we saw with regression a little while back, right?
Yeah.
Right. So this is we have a vulnerability that's showing kind of backup. Vulnerabilities tracked as CVE 2024-7589. So this one's a little bit interesting. If you read the sort of tech note, a signal handler, an SSHD, which is the daemon that runs SSH, gives users the ability to do a secure shell to a Linux box, may call a logging function that is not async signal safe. So async signal safe, a lot of us developers, right? You write multi-threaded code because if you wrote single-threaded code, it'd be hard to have a UI, right?
Well, or asynchronous code anyway. It could be single-threaded, but asynchronous code is very, very popular among developers, but mere mortals might not know what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say we want to do multiple things at once, or let's say we write a program and we want to go reach out to grab the weather from a weather service. Mm-hmm. Speaking of how the terrible rainstorm I got going on right now. So let's say I had a program in front of me and I wanted to display like clouds or lightning bolts or whatever. I might call out to a web service to get that data and come back. Well, I don't want to have to wait for the web service to respond.
Right.
So I might do it asynchronously. I make the call. And then my program goes about its business, and eventually a call comes back to me saying, hey, oh, by the way, the answer came back. Here's the answer. Yeah, it's going to be horrible thunderstorm.
Sort of like tapping you on the shoulder and saying, here. Like right. you send somebody out for a banana, and they come back when they have the banana, and they tap you on the shoulder and say, here it is.
I can say I don't think in my life I've ever sent anybody out for a banana.
Not Al Pacino? Did you see the thing about there was a post on X Twitter about somebody making good use of AI by creating Al Pacino screaming at the price of bananas?
Oh my God, I've not seen
hilarious. All right, so anyway.
So needless to say,
async.
Yeah, so that's async, right? So what's happening here is, and we're speculating a little bit because a lot of the detail hasn't been released yet, but if you go all the way to the bottom of the article, which we're going to give you a link, it says in cases where your SSH cannot be updated, because you can update and patch for this, but in cases that this cannot be updated, what you need to do is set the logon grace time to 0 in the etc SSH config and then restart it. While this change makes the daemon vulnerable to denial of service, it will safeguard it from remote code execution. So I think what's happening is they're making a call almost very similar to the way you do what's called a slow loris attack against a web server, right? Slow loris was like I'd open a connection to a web server and I'd hold it half open.
Yeah.
And then I would open another connection, hold it half open. Right, and it doesn't take long before I eat up the whole pool. Same thing here. I think what's happening is they're initiating part of an SSH connection and holding that connection open for as long as they can, the grace timeout period, right? And if they keep doing that, probably run out of buffer, and then at that point get to manipulate a buffer overflow or something along those lines.
Tricky. They're not even doing anything.
Right?
All right. So is there anything that we can do about this?
So for the affected systems, you absolutely can go patch. If for some reason you're in between patch windows, or I know a lot of companies have change review boards and patch windows and all sorts of other stuff, the thing you could do is just change that timeout.
Right. Okay. All right. So you're going to hear quite a few stories about Windows, including our clickbait thing. But here you go. August 2024 Patch Tuesday fixes 9 0 days, 6 of which were exploited. This is good news. This is Microsoft being on top of it. Patch Tuesday. Yeah.
It's funny. I don't think I've ever seen, like, if you take a look at Patch Tuesday, it says today is Microsoft's August 24th Patch Tuesday, which includes security updates for 89 flaws. 89 flaws. 36 privilege escalations, 4 security feature bypasses, 28 remote code executions, 28 RCEs, which is insane, 8 information disclosures, 6 denial of services, 7 spoofing and vulnerabilities, and 1 partridge in a pear tree.
Did you hear that, Danielle? Hear that, Danielle? My sister-in-law is still running an old version of Windows Vista.
Ooh,
and refuses to upgrade. Hear that?
Maybe go past
89.
But, and I think a lot of people would look at this and say, oh my gosh, how crappy is this software if in 1 month you can release 89 fixes? And I think all this, you got to think of this in a different way. You got to think of this in 1 month. They not only have discovered 89 flaws, but they've fixed 89 flaws and have deployed a patch. Like, they're that on top of digging into the software and finding these issues and fixing them, which is awesome. It's fantastic, honestly.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We need more good news like this. All right, so let's see. One more and then we'll take a break. GitHub Actions artifacts. Remember that foreshadowing I was talking about?
Right.
GitHub Actions artifacts found leaking auth tokens in popular projects. I hate it when I leak auth tokens. Usually, I call a plumber. Sometimes I go to the doctor. Depends on what kind of leak it is. But leaking auth tokens just sounds bad.
Hey, Doc, I find I'm leaking auth tokens. What do you think?
There's a cream for that. There's a patch for that.
There's a patch for that. This one's interesting. There are, according to this article on Bleeping Computer, multiple high-profile open-source projects, including Google, Microsoft, AWS, Red Hat, etc., were found to leak GitHub authentication tokens through the GitHub Actions artifacts in the CI/CD workflows. So if you have continuous integration and continuous development workflows, right? As we develop code, as we check it in, as we mark, major milestones and whatever it may be, there's pipelines you can put into play in GitHub where they will automatically compile code or automatically deploy code or automatically do unit testing. There's all sorts of cool stuff there.
Yeah.
So Palo Alto's Unit 42, fantastic network, team at finding exploits, found a way to access those artifacts, and in those artifacts, sometimes there's actually pretty secret keys in there. So they're saying that. Unfortunately for a lot of these, it's pretty easy for an attacker to go in, manipulate the pipeline, and get access to these GitHub tokens.
So what can they do with these GitHub tokens? Let's just say if they were as evil as you.
Well, it depends on what the tokens go to, right? It very well may be that some of these tokens are actually cloud keys, right? And I might have access to cloud servers. Or cloud infrastructure.
So they wouldn't be like off tokens just for that session or something like that. These are
some of them could be. The speculation is some of these auth tokens are used in part of the CI/CD pipeline. So they're only available for 6 hours, right? Yeah. While that pipeline has access and whatever it may be. But depending on the key, the resources needed for the CI/CD pipeline. It could be that it's accessing, AWS servers, or it's accessing, Azure infrastructure, and they're using key authentication to do that, which also may leak in this pipeline. So, so the keys could be a couple of hours all the way to, never expiring. So you got to be careful there.
So what's the best practice when setting up a GitHub action pipeline for, that uses tokens? Are there ways to protect it, or are you just kind of screwed?
No, there are. So there are ways of changing things. Like in this particular case, it's really kind of exploitable if somebody uploads the wrong things, right? So really cultivating that git ignore and making sure you're not uploading a lot of your .git directory, which actually can contain these tokens.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Is just making sure that the tokens don't actually make it up to where they shouldn't.
Right.
And then the other thing is there is an ability in your actions and checkouts that you can adjust to make sure that certain credentials don't actually persist once the pipeline is done. So I think there are recommendations in that article for cleaning up your CI/CD pipelines. Just make sure that in general, you're not uploading more to GitHub than you need to. Lots of people aren't really sure what is needed in a project. So they're like, I'll just upload everything in this directory. And that's where you run into this danger.
Okay. And with that, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with the third half of Security This Week. Stay tuned. And we're back. You're listening to Security This Week. I'm Carl Franklin, and Dwayne LaFlade is here. Patrick is in Germany enjoying some Braunschweiger or some Schweinhack or some sort of schnitzel, perhaps.
Lots of schnitzel, I think. Lots of schnitzel.
Sounds so funny. What is all the schnitzel in this fridge?
Right?
So next, from Bleeping Computer, NIST, N-I-S-T, releases first encryption tools to resist quantum computing. And man, I wish Patrick were here for this one.
Right? Oh my gosh. I was like super excited when this article was released August 14th, so 24 hours ago. And I was super excited. I was like, Patrick's going to love this. And then, unfortunately, he can't get on. But really what this is Patrick, actually, if you go back and if you've been listening to Security This Week for, we've been doing this, 2-3 years now?
Yeah.
3 years, I think.
150 episodes.
There you go. Wow. Yeah. So if you listen to security this week over the 3 years, you've heard Patrick continually talk about quantum resistant cryptography.
Right.
So we talk about quantum computers having the ability to crack current day encryption. Not today. Can't be done right now, but in the future, right? Maybe it's even only 5 years or 10 years.
There's probably some quantum computer in a lab somewhere that could do it, but it isn't available to the public.
Absolutely. And the way quantum computers work is they work on probabilities, right? So it's not a yes/no answer. It's this is probably the key to decrypt this particular encrypted stream or whatever it may be. But so in what's happening right now is a lot of harvest and decrypt later, right? Nation states are literally gathering up as much encrypted data as they possibly can in hopes that in the near term, they're going to be able to decrypt it and find out what that information actually says.
Right.
So in that, there have been a lot of sort of arguments around how do we protect today's data for the future? How do we make sure that the encryption we're using today is quantum safe, right?
It's kind of like having your head cryogenically frozen,
right? But you want to do it with the right cryogenic process.
And the right partner, yeah. It's like, I didn't inject formaldehyde into my ears. Right. Damn, I can't hear in the future.
You were just going to put your head in a freezer. You've probably heard Patrick talk about crystals Kyber and crystals dilithium and those other that was sort of the code names, right? That's what they were formerly called. Now they're actually have a FIPS name for them. So FIPS 203 is what was known as crystals Kyber. FIPS 204 is what was known as crystals dilithium, and FIPS 205 is what was known as Sphinx. I don't even know how you say that.
And why do we care?
INCS. All this is showing is we've gotten to the point where implementing post-quantum cryptography, actually there's a standard now of the algorithms you should be using. And developers should now start looking at this. They should say, okay, there's an official standard. It's out by NIST. We should start, anytime we're using cryptography in our applications, we should start using either FIPS 204, 203, or 205.
Now, when you say cryptography on our applications, I mean, if you have a web app, you're using cryptography. If you have a domain, because you're using SSL, there's no way, I don't think, that a programmer could get in there and say, no, I don't want to use SSL. I want to use quantum safe SSL. Or I want to, protected browser storage uses cryptography. How can I encrypt that with quantum safe? You know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely.
Where exactly are you going to do this?
Right. So this would be more for, let's say you were a developer storing, sensitive SCI level security clearance documents on a stored hard drive, right? On a shared server where you're going to encrypt
something
those
important.
Documents. Right, exactly. You're going to encrypt those documents before they go there. Or let's say we had to transport data that was like eyes-only security between two different agencies. Well, it's going to be encrypted. It's going to be above and beyond encrypted. It's not just going to be SSL, right? They're going to encrypt those packets and decrypt them on the remote side.
Right.
And this is where these algorithms would come into play, where we're saying, okay, you're implementing cryptography for the data you're passing back and forth. For a developer using SSL, that data is hyper transient, right? If I'm accessing a website today, maybe you can decrypt my web traffic later on. And I would assume that things like SSL will come up to speed with these, but not yet.
So what you're saying is you really have to have an application whose job it is to encrypt data, decrypt data using an algorithm for safety reasons, either for storage or transport or something. But you're actually the one, your code is the one that's doing the encrypting and decrypting.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
All right. Okay, good to know. So Windows Smart Screen Bypass exploited as 0-day since March. All right, so one question. Was this fixed on Patch Tuesday?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me check. I think it was. Yes, I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah, it says it was passed. Okay, June 2024, Patch Tuesday. So it's kind of an old story.
Yes. What's interesting about this one is it's getting a fair bit of hype. If you're not patching on Patch Tuesday, you really should just automatically be out there patching. But what I wanted to do is break this one down a little bit. So this one says it's a smart screen bypass. So what's smart screen? Smart screen is a process of Defender that actually tells you whether an application should run or not, right? So if I download a random executable on the internet, Windows Defender will pop up Smart Screen and say, hey, you do realize that this is an odd executable. Like, this isn't run that often.
Gives you a chance to say, no, don't run that.
Right, exactly.
One chance.
Right. And let's say it was like putty.exe and you went to run it and it's like, hey, nobody's ever run this before. And you're like, wait, that might not be putty.exe. It might be a virus or something like that named putty.exe, right? Whatever it may be. So that's what Smart Screen is. So Smart Screen bypass, I get a little concerned where you're like, ooh, I might be able to send an executable to somebody to have them execute it. And then on top of that, what this also does is it's a bypass for what's called the mark of the web. And I think we've talked about mark of the web before. Anytime
it's Marky Mark.
Marky Mark of the
Mark
web.
Wahlberg.
And the Fresh Punch.
He's Mark of the web.
He's Mark of the web. Listen, if Mark Wahlberg hands you an executable, just run it. It's
just
fine. He's cool. Yeah. He's a good dude. He's from Boston. He's in between Carl and I. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe Mark.
He's the only Mark you should run things from. Is Marky Mark. Okay. But anyways, Mark Wahlberg. So anyways, if we take a look at this, the mark of the web is when I download an executable from the internet. Or from, a random share or whatever it may be, that executable has an alternate data stream added to it that says this came from an insecure location. Right. So when you go to double click on it, there's added security verifications for that executable. Yep. And that helps with someone sending you an exe an email or someone sending you an exe, a link that you download an exe over the web.
Yep.
So anytime you have a mark of the web bypass, then you get worried that somebody could send you an executable and you'd run it and it wouldn't go through these security hoops, if you will. Yeah. So this is where I would actually myself, I started to get really excited. I was like, woohoo, maybe it's the heyday of me being able to send executables to people and getting them to run them again. I know. I get excited at these things.
Again.
Right. It's you can run things that Mark Wahlberg sends you. Never run anything Dwayne sends you. That's kind of the rule.
Don't if he ever says, "Hey, can you click that thing that I just sent you?" No. Right. The answer's no.
So the other thing is this is then marked as can be remotely executed by an unauthenticated threat actor because I'm sending you an executable, so I'm remote and you're running it.
There's actually a mark that says that. Hey, this can be.
There is.
This can be executed by hackers.
Right. So, but the thing I want to tell you is this. Although this sounds really scary, like you can send somebody an executable and they could just run it and it bypasses a whole bunch of things. There's still you have to click on it.
Yeah, it's not zero click. Because that would be crazy.
That would be crazy.
Film at 11,
0
kids.
day, but one click. Exactly.
Stay tuned,
be careful
kids.
What you click on. Like, don't.
Or not click on.
Exactly. That's you know what? It's a great point, Carl. Just don't click on anything.
Just don't.
If you're just nothing, there's no reason to click on stuff.
Yep. No click computing.
No click. Just don't click at all. That's all I'm going to say. So really, this follows into the paradigm of you might hear this because it literally just came out a couple days ago. You might get a lot of hype on the web, but in reality, it follows the same rules of somebody sends you something you're not expecting. Don't click on it.
Sure.
And you'll probably be okay.
Okay. One more before the clickbait. 2.9 billion records may have been exposed in a data breach. Here's what to know. So they don't even know if it was 2.9 billion records or any records? What's with may have been?
Maybe.
What is that?
Maybe not. The fact that it's up for sale for $3.5 million is weird if it didn't actually get accessed, but that's okay. Wow. I love the name of this company. The complaint stated that the National Public Data of Florida. National Public Data. Like, that's the name. That's the shadiest name ever. We are National Public Data.
Yeah.
For national data.
And it's Florida based, so you know that it's legit and not crazy pants at all.
So is Florida based data broker there again, which means they sell it to somebody, company owned by Jericho Pictures. Okay. Movie house? I'm not entirely sure what's going on there.
Sounds like a guy with a video camera who registered a domain name.
Jericho Pictures. And they conduct background checks. Was breached in April, revealing people's full names, current and past addresses, social security numbers, as well as data tied into living and deceased members of their family. NPD obtains its data by scraping the personally identifiable information from billions of individuals from non-public sources. This means that those affected may not knowingly know that their data is actually at national public data.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and according to the hacker forums, let's see, fields, ID, first name, last name, middle name, name suff for your name suffix, date of birth, address, city, county name, state, zip, phone 1, aka 1 full name, aka 2 full name, aka 3 full names, start date, maybe for a job, alt 1 date of birth, alt 2 date of birth, alt 3 date of birth, and your social security number were all included in that.
So does Troy Hunt have it yet? He must be running out of disk space by now.
Oh, right?
I mean, here's 2.9 billion records, Troy. Add that to get Have I Been Pwned.
Yeah, and this one's 277 gig uncompressed. I mean, this is a lot of data.
Wow.
So it'll be interesting to see when this does hit more publicly. Yeah, so we'll definitely keep an eye on that.
We'll be watching on that. Okay, and now the coup de grace to end this show. Maybe once and for all.
Oh my God, yeah.
From bleeping computers, zero-click Windows TCP/IP RCE, that's remote code execution, impacts all systems with IP6 enabled. Patch now. Okay, IP6.
This is
let's
awesome.
talk about that.
This is awesome.
This is
Carl,
ridiculous.
This is awesome.
And you know what that means, folks.
So we had IPv4, right? And back in the 90s and early 2000s, everybody was freaked out that IPv4, we were running out of addresses, right? More in the 90s. And IPv4 is like, Google, for example, has a DNS server, which is 8.8.8.8, right? So it's 4
One
numbers.
Of the first.
Yeah, between 4 numbers between 0 and 255. They call them octets, right?
Yep.
So we have 4 octets of numbers. Why is it an octet?
4 bytes.
Because if you break it down, exactly. If you break it down, blah, blah, whatever. So, so we have all of that. So there's only so many of those. So a standard came out a bajillion years ago, which was IPv6, right? The newer version. And everybody was like, oh my God, we're going to switch over to IPv6 immediately. And then there really wasn't a need anymore, right?
Because
most networks are natted.
Network address translation. So that means that your business or company has one public IP address that's routable, and everybody inside that router or whatever that's connected to it has a private, non-routable IP address, 10.10.10.1 or 192. etc.
Yeah, so now there's really not a need for a company to have that many publicly routable IP addresses. Like, people do have them, and Amazon, for example, has a bajillion of them, but really, we're not running out of IPv4 as fast as we were before. Well, fast forward, Microsoft and a lot of operating systems said, well, we should prepare for this. We should prepare for IPv6. So they put the protocol in Windows. It's been in Windows for a very long time. And just recently, I say recently, probably, 5-6 years ago, they've enabled IPv6 by default. So that your Windows system, if you were to go to a command prompt and type ipconfig, you probably see an IPv4 address and potentially an IPv6 address. So it's pretty ubiquitous in Windows systems. There is a lab, Kunlun Labs, found this issue where there is a buffer, an integer underflow.
Now I've heard of overflow. Is an underflow a less than the max negative number?
Yeah, exactly. So let's say we're going to, I don't know, let's say we're always expecting a number between 1 and 32767, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be our number. And if I can manipulate that integer to be 0, well, now we've kind of underflowed the system. So if we say, hey, hold open this TCP IP stream for a number of seconds, let's say, between 1 and 32767, and then we manipulate the number to get to be 0, well, maybe it holds it open forever, or maybe it holds it open not at all, or whatever it may be. So this underflow allows somebody on the network to execute code just by having access to that box over IPv6. And what's odd is there are tons of boxes on the internet that have IPv6 on right now that are Windows boxes.
Right.
And we've seen flaws like this in the past. I don't know if you remember the ping of death.
Oh, yeah. I tested it out on my brother. Yeah.
So the ping of death was
calls me. He's like, "Hey, my machine just went down." Like, yeah, sorry about that.
That's weird. I don't know what you're talking about. So the ping of death was one where you could have gotten remote code execution, but more often than not, it denial of service and just crashed everything.
Just crashed the computer.
Yeah. So we've definitely seen these style of attacks before. The thing that's interesting about this is twofold. One, it is 0-click. So anybody on the network with you with an IPv6 address can exploit this. And two, it does, because the TCP IP stack is so low in the chain, does give pretty high level privileges. So you'll absolutely want to go patch it.
But let's think about this. I mean, if you're a regular schmo and you've got a cable modem or something or whatever it is you have, that has an IP6 address, but that's not a Windows machine.
Right, exactly.
All the Windows machines have private IPv6 addresses.
They should.
So they're not routable.
Right.
So really you're talking about somebody who has a Windows server with a public IP address running IPv6 that's out in front of the firewall.
Or if I were to breach an organization through other means, I now may be able to take over all those Windows servers and or clients, and that would be another big issue. But yeah, you're right. The general population is not going to need to worry about this over the internet. It's just really organizations that have Windows servers and clients will absolutely want to patch. And if you're concerned that, locally one of your computers gets infected, it might be used as a way to laterally move around.
If you have VMs in the cloud, might be a good idea to restart them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, absolutely. However, this also was patched in the Patch Tuesday, all those massive patches we talked about. So, and just make sure you go out and patch. But this is a really interesting bug.
Cool. So that's it. That's our Patrickless patch story. And hopefully we'll see you at Dev Intersection. 2 for 1, kids. Go get it.
Woohoo.
All right. We'll see you next time.
All right. Sounds good.
Bye.
See you guys.